The one who has been robbed seems unaware that the thief is just over his shoulder and looking for more. The thief's nest is coming along nicely, probably because he keeps a particularly sharp lookout for robbers. After all, it takes one to know one. It's still cold, but the early season sun does lift the temperature by a few degrees. That, however, can have unexpected, even dangerous consequences. The sea is heating faster than the land, pulling cold air from the middle of the continent towards the coast. These katabatic winds are stronger than any hurricane. They are the coldest and the most ferocious on the planet. The storms catch many new arrivals by surprise, and are the reason that spring here is, in fact, the deadliest season. Here, early birds take a great risk. Some years, entire colonies are lost, buried beneath the snow. The survivors of this storm must hope that the females prove to be worth the wait when they finally decide to turn up. The Adelie penguins must rear their half-grown chicks to adulthood before winter hits in just a few weeks' time. The chicks are only 3 weeks old. Their downy coats aren't fully waterproof yet, and they cluster together for warmth. These creches are essential during bad weather, as most of the adults are away at sea, fishing for their fast-growing families. When the parents return, their offspring quickly leave the comfort of their peers. Both chicks are ravenously hungry. But there may be only enough food for one. This race could determine which chick has the better prospects. Most Adelie pairs will only manage to raise a single chick each season. And this may not be it. At least number one is getting stronger by the day. With one meal delivered, the parents must quickly find another. rear their chicks before the onset of winter, the penguins must work round the clock. The parents can travel over 100 miles to reach the best fishing grounds and may be gone for several days at a time. They return with a kilogram of fish and squid in their bellies, feed their chicks, and then go off again to repeat the process. The job must be finished before the sea freezes over again. At 7 weeks old, the chicks are losing the last of their baby down and are now fully equipped to take the plunge. Confidence is all that's lacking. Perhaps it'll help if the parents lead by example. There, effortless and as graceful as any fish. It seems penguins are not born with a love of water. Staying submerged is the next problem. Buoyancy control is clearly a skill that needs practice. Well, it's and at least they can now reach the ice floes. The Adelies drift out into the Southern Ocean. They will spend the next 5 months feeding at sea, avoiding the great freeze that is about to envelop Antarctica.
Towards the penguin colony, it's one of Earth's most magnificent sights. You know, it's just these thousands and thousands of penguins. I had the same as anybody I meet here in the UK when I talk about penguins. Is that, you know, I get this impression that they're comical, they're funny, that, you know, that some of them speak like Robin Williams and some of them dance. You know, there's this kind of image that we all have of penguins, and as you get to spend time, and I think probably over the process of 2 or 3 days, you realise that the complete opposite is true about penguins. They're probably the most aggressive, foul-tempered, you know, just awful birds that you could ever come across. Simply because they are so competitive. They got to get through this breeding season. But to begin with, it sort of hits you, it slaps you in the face. Literally, you're being battered by penguins as far as, you know, every time you step into the colony, because they want you to get out of the way because they've got something to do, and they're hitting you with their flippers. And on top of that, they're all feeding chicks once the chicks start hatching, and vomiting, you know, digested krill over each other. And then when they're not vomiting on each other, they're fighting each other. And when they're not fighting each other, they're spreading excrement as far as the eye can see. So it's like walking into a war zone where everybody is puking on one another. And then you add to that the noise, and the noise is something no one ever warns you about, is the collective din of 500,000 penguins. The noise is so loud that Mark and I would quite often, in order to have a conversation about what we wanted to film, we would have to walk out of the colony, often for a kilometre. You know, it might take us half an hour, sit on the ice, get some calm, come up with a strategy and go back in, because it was so distracting. The amount of stimuli that were throwing themselves at you was so huge that it was you could barely hear yourself think, in a very literal way. There is the sort of daily hardships that, you know, often go unnoticed in these types of shoots. There is no running water. What we do for water is we have to boil down snow, and as anybody who's tried to boil down snow knows, it takes a huge amount of snow to create a very small amount of water, and so it's a very time and energy inefficient process. So things like washing go completely out the window. Now normally that's not such a bad thing, you know, on shoots, you know, you can cope with it, but Mark and I were spending 18 hours a day at penguin level, covered in penguin puke and excrement, to the point where we were almost unrecognisable by the time we came back. Now, to not be able to wash that off for a very, very long period of time is not something I would recommend to anybody as an experience. Perhaps one of the most challenging things about working for that period of time, for 4 months in a penguin colony with just 2 people, is the mental strain that you undergo on a daily basis. You know, your routine is much like it is with any other wildlife filming, very much like a Groundhog Day.
Here we are on the penguin superhighway, where the penguins go down to the sea. It seems that they follow the American system, driving on the right. I'm fairly sure that yesterday they were doing the British system.
You follow the same routine day in, day out, and hoping to capture those pure moments of behaviour. But to do so in a place where you're overstimulated by, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of penguins, plus you've only got one other person to kind of offload your emotions, your thoughts, your kind of fears, all of that on, it becomes a very mentally trying experience.
I hate carrying gear. Hear that? I hate carrying gear. I don't want to do it anymore.
I think Mark and we coped with it to begin with. By the end, we were truly losing our minds, if I'm honest.
Here we are, travelling through the Antarctic. By sled, we've been pulled by a herd of huskies. Oh! 12 of them, panting out front, breath steaming from their mouths. And as we go along, we see the happy people waving at us.
As far as the penguins are concerned, I think the huge privilege of spending an enormous amount of time with penguins is you realise what an amazing bird this is, that it crams in its entire breeding life cycle into 4 months. It was something that certainly I left with, having been totally disgusted by this bird at the midpoint, to a point of almost pure, you know, admiration of putting this penguin on a pedestal. To me, you know, our job is to communicate that. It's not my job isn't to go down and experience these places for personal gain. You know, our job is to bring that back, and I think that's a huge motivator. You're aware that you're being sent to this place as a communicator, as somebody who has to bring back the experience. And I think when you're at your lowest moment, when you're in the penguin colony and it's absolutely heinous, you do remind yourself that you need to tell other people and you need to show other people what a privilege it is. And I think for me that's the massive motivation in my job, is this position that you've been put in to communicate the natural world to others, and hopefully, you know, we give some people a sense of what that's like.
đứng gần nó bay mệt á.
Bị ấy á bà.
Đứng gần nó.
Nó bị
Không sao đâu. Work on a cruise ship. Work on a cruise ship. Nó vượt mực. Gimana? Today is September 15, 2018. We about arrive Boston, Massachusetts. So we arrive at 8 a.m. and boarding at 4:30 p.m. Today is September 15, 2018. We arrived Boston, so we got a line to go to Boston. Boston!
The other way.
Đây đó, cái bus.
Tại cái này nó chở đi đó.
Go to Kennedy Museum.
Đi nó học trường này nè, đi Thu Quyên.
University of Massachusetts.
This is pre-film. Should we go and see it?
Sorry.
Tát cho nó đi ông cũng chết rồi phản ta. Nãy nó có cho ba cái bên vết ở đâu.
Có nữa, có cầm đó. Có
Dạ, chính anh em.
đó, mấy. Jacqueline. Dịp.
Chị thấy nó thử đã chỉ mê bà này là chị lấy tiền nó.
Library and Museum. Special welcome to our guests with Tour America. Very glad to have you here today. My name is Ian Shepard. I'm from 430. Now, if you are interested in doing research, but perhaps making an appointment is not a possibility for you, you can go to our website, jfklibrary.org. We are digitizing our records and putting them online as you wish, so everyone can get everything they need from the film. Downstairs here, you'll be heading right after the film for JFK. By 1963, however, Gallup polls would go on to show that 59% of the nation recalled voting for him, about 10% more than actually had. This was taken a few months before his tragic death as well, so something to keep in mind while you make your way to the museum. We do have the Fitzgerald Family Bible, a copy of the inaugural address, and a presentation on how it was composed on display for you. We have, of course, the Deliverance itself, remastered for your viewing pleasure. And then you're off to the White House here, where we have some of the First Lady's dresses and gowns on display. We have gifts that are given to the White House, gifts given by the White House, the actual Freedom 7 space capsule, which carried Alan Shepard for the first U.S. manned mission to space. We have a short film on the Cuban Missile Crisis featuring secret recordings President Kennedy took while meeting with XCOM during that terrifying 2-week period. Representations of the Oval Office, the Office of the Attorney General, an actual section of the Berlin Wall, and much more. While you're here, you'll be delighted to know this is a self-guided visit, so if you're tired of listening to me, I promise I'm almost done. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to help during your visit.
The film that you are about to watch was written, produced, and directed exclusively for the museum. During the film, you will hear President Convention in Los Angeles, where then Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts receives and accepts his party's nomination for President of the United States. At the conclusion of the film, please continue to the next exhibit, the Democratic Convention, by going down the stairs located at the front of the theater. Restrooms may be found next to the first exhibit. If you wish to use the elevator, please return to the theater lobby and photo gallery behind you. The elevator is in the corner just outside the theater entrance doors. For your safety and the safety of others, we ask that you do not leave your seats while
Often we hold fast to the cliches of our forebears. We subject all facts to a prefabricated set of interpretations. We enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. Mythology distracts us everywhere, for the great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic.
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1917. We had 5 girls and 4 boys. I don't think you can have 9 children in the house without it being some rigid authority, and I think my father supplied that, but not unnecessarily so, and I think it did us all good. I think I've always was interested in history and have spent a lot of time on it, and even at that time was particularly interested in it. My father was then working for the government as chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission under President Roosevelt, and later as chairman of the Maritime Commission. And therefore there was a great atmosphere of government and politics in my house, but I never thought at that time of going into it.
In 1938, Joseph Kennedy takes up a third and most challenging post in the service of his country. At the White House on a day in February, he is sworn in by Supreme Court Justice Stanley Reed as American Ambassador to Great Britain. Later that same month, Ambassador Kennedy is on his way, bound for a restless, troubled, and apprehensive Europe.
During the time I was in college, I had taken a half year off and worked in the American Embassy in Paris in the winter and the spring of 1939. In June of 1939, I went to Poland and stayed 3 weeks there. And I took a train to Moscow and got some impression of the Soviet Union. I didn't have a high opinion of them before I went, and of the system, and much less after being there. There was massive inefficiency, and the life was grim and dour and windswept and dusty. It's a very depressing country. After Russia, I came home through Berlin. It was a great chance to go because it was certainly Europe on the eve, and everything was, the tempo was heightened because of it.
Without the proof of the time, deine Familie in Aktion verhält.
It's a great opportunity to see a period of history which is one of the most significant.
At this time, we're indeed pleased to have with us in our studios Mr. John F. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy is the author of the recently published book, Why England Slept. Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, where did you go to school?
Well, I attended Harvard. I just finished there this June.
What is this book about, Mr. Kennedy?
Well, this book is an attempt to analyze the reasons for Britain's failure to rearm in the face of a rearming Germany.
Countless German bombers and protection fighters were used in the mass raids on England today.
I spent a lot of time in boats, and therefore when the war looked as if the war was coming, I was interested in joining the Navy. My brother's in the Navy too. We living near the sea. I think everyone who could headed in that direction. I joined in September 1941.
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Guadalcanal in an attempt to prevent the Japanese from supplying their bases where they had their units of troops in all those islands. Well, our PTO was sunk by a Japanese destroyer. We drifted around for a day or so, and then we moved from island to island, and then finally about 9 or 10 days later we ran into a native, and we gave him a coconut, and he took it back to our base, and they came finally and got us.
I realize the tragic significance of the atomic bomb. Having found the atomic bomb, we have used it. We shall continue to use it until we completely destroy Japan's power to make war.
p.m. Eastern Wartime, Bob Trout reporting. The Japanese have accepted our terms fully. That's the word we just received from the White House in Washington. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the Second World War.
Well, after I came home and I was released from the Navy, I went to work for a newspaper, the Chicago Herald American, and then I came home to Boston. I had an older brother who had been, I thought would be a politician. Well, he was killed as a flyer in Europe. Well, I never wanted to be in politics until really almost the time I ran. I was always interested in writing. I wanted to teach for a while. So that really the war changed my life, and I suppose if it hadn't been for that and what happened then, I suppose I would have gone on with my original plans.
Who can fight and fight till he wins? Kennedy can. Kennedy can.
When I first went into Congress in 1946, I represented a district that was very poor in Massachusetts. We had many problems, housing, many families were in need of assistance, and therefore my viewpoint on the necessity for social legislation came really pragmatically, through just observation.
Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable John F. Kennedy, United States Representative from Massachusetts.
Mr. Kennedy, I believe you visited the Middle East on your trip. Now, why is it that we Americans have so many enemies in the Middle East today?
Well, I think that there's two reasons. In the first place, all of these countries, stretching from French North Africa to the South China Sea, French Indochina, all of these countries have been or still are under the domination of Western powers, the so-called white powers. And there, therefore, is a heritage of animosity and hatred directed against the West, and as we are the strongest of the Western powers, we fall heir to a great deal of that. Secondly, these people live on a marginal level. Their standard of living is very low. Most of them are illiterate. They have this past history of Western exploitation. The communists, or at least the Russians, have not had a comparable colonial experience in this area. They move among the people and say, how could you be worse off than you now are? Come with us and you might be better off. It's compounded by the fact that in some of these countries they have native oligarchies who are corrupt and are not concerned about the welfare of the people. All these things compound in these difficult days make for a fertile field for communist infiltration and weakness for the West.
Our audience, of course, is particularly interested in your views because it's been mentioned that you are a possible or probable candidate for the United States Senate against Senator Lodge. Have you decided whether or not you're going to oppose Senator Lodge this year?
Mr. Huey, I plan to announce my plans about what I thought I might do about the end of April. At that time, I thought I'd make them definite, but I'm certainly considering it very strongly.
Well, I think that campaigns are a terrible grind. Some people say they enjoy them, but in addition to the routine that you have to undergo, there's the doubt always about whether you're going to be successful, and the combination really makes it a very difficult period.
Congressman Kennedy, how do you feel about your race for the Senate up here?
Well, I think it's going very well, and of course, have great expectations. I think the state's going Democratic, and I think that the ticket's going to be successful. And if elected to the Senate of the United States this November, I will fight for the New England industry, which is so a fight. Can you come on? For the people of this state and for the future of our country. Victory is here. After 20 years, the Republican Party is back in power. General Dwight D. Eisenhower is elected. His party has won control of Congress, with the Senate pretty evenly divided.
In Massachusetts Senate race, Representative John F. Kennedy scores one of the few major Democratic victories, decisively defeating in a tough battle the Republican incumbent Henry Cabot Lodge Jr.
Well, I'm pretty sure glad it's over, aren't you, Robin? I am, yeah. Okay.
I don't think that youth is any presumption of vitality, or old age any presumption of wisdom. It really, once again, it seems to me, depends on the competence of the individual. We've had an extremely great number of talented younger men in the life of this country, from Jefferson and Hamilton and all the rest. And we've had a lot of very talented older men. I would really think, once again, it comes down to the quality of the individual.
Are you simply swamped by invitations from Washington hostesses? I mean, you're a single man and a senator. That must make you most eligible.
Well, you would think so, Holly, but nothing seems to happen. Life goes on about the same as always.
I met her 3 years ago at a dinner in Washington. She used to be the inquiring photographer for the Times Herald at that time. Was it a case of love at first sight? Well, I don't know. I don't know how you would describe that, but anyway, I was very interested.
The wedding of Senator John F. Kennedy recalls Newport's one-time social grandeur. Former Ambassador and Mrs. Joseph Kennedy, parents of the groom, are among the personalities on hand to make this the top society wedding of the year. For the spectators outside the church, it's a real storybook wedding. A radiant bride, the former Jacqueline Bouvier, and a handsome groom. With a pretty wife and a politically rising star, the future seems bright for the junior senator from Massachusetts.
We're going up to Boston to meet Senator John Kennedy and his bride. You have a chance to do much reading?
Yes, well, I used to very much, and I try to do it as much as I can now.
Have you found anything that has been particularly useful, or perhaps I could use the word inspirational to you?
Well, I do have something here that was written by Alan Seagull, who, as you remember, was born in New York and fought in the Foreign Legion and was killed in the First World War in 1916.
Yes.
He wrote that famous poem, I Have a Rendezvous with Death, and just before he died, he wrote a letter home to his mother, which I think is good advice for all of us. He said, "Whether I am on the winning or losing side is not the point with me. It is being on the side where my sympathies lie that matters. Success in life means doing that thing than which nothing else conceivable seems more noble or satisfying or remunerative, and then being ready to see it through to the end."
Senator, I know you recently underwent surgery for injuries received during World War II. I was wondering if during your period of convalescence you had any dominant thoughts? Well, I think that probably sitting in bed for some months, which I did, is a trial, I suppose, to anybody. I think that the only sort of solution and salvation is to become interested in a particular project, and I became interested in writing the stories of 8 United States senators who, at crucial periods in our country's history, took a decision against the wishes of their constituents, and in some cases gave up their careers for the national interest. And so I wrote that book during this period, and it was published this January.
Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen, from Chicago's International Amphitheater, the site of the 1956 National Democratic Nominating Convention.
Fellow delegates, I give you the man from Louisville, the next Democratic nominee, and our next President of the United States, Admiral T. Stevenson.
Vice President with us?
Well, I'm the honest course it's chosen, but I've always had my doubts whether I ever be chosen. I ran for the Vice Presidency in 1956 in Democratic convention. I was beaten by Estes Keyfall.
Vice President too,
Empire 74 votes for Estes Keyfall.
Someone has said that you really don't understand politics until you've been defeated, and then all the mysteries become apparent. After the Democrats lost in '56, I began to think that maybe I would run in 1960, and began to work weekends traveling around the United States. And finally decided in '58 that I would run. I was on the Rackets Committee for 3 years in the Senate. I think we made it uncomfortable for a good many racketeers. We made it uncomfortable for Jimmy Hoffa and some of the others.
Spending as much time as necessary to acquaint the American people with the fact that this is a strike-breaking, union-busting bill. In my opinion,
Mr. Hoffa, this bill is not a strike-breaking, union-busting bill. You're the best argument I know for it. Your testimony here this afternoon, your complete indifference to the fact that numerous people who hold responsible positions in your union come before this committee and take the Fifth Amendment because an honest answer might tend to incriminate them. Your complete indifference to it, I think, makes this bill essential.
Ông có 2 đứa con không con? Thằng Tech hay gì đó, thằng Kennedy, thằng Caroline của bạn.
Caroline anh cũng biết nữa. Quan tốt.
Perhaps no man is rising faster on the nation's political scene than Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
The Kennedy Campaign Organization has named its battleground for the presidential nomination, the primary. A substantial victory for Kennedy in Wisconsin, and the experts say his bandwagon is on its way.
And I can assure you that if I'm successful here, I shall go to Los Angeles in hopes of being nominated. And if I am nominated, I shall go to the American people. I shall go to them discussing the great and serious business that faces the American people in this difficult period.
Pandemonium is literally raining right now at Los Angeles Airport because Senator John Kennedy has just arrived here, said hello to about 5,000 supporters and turned off the greeting.
The man who can lead us to meet that responsibility, to lead us to a fruitful America, to a peaceful world for mankind everywhere, is the great senator from the state of Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy.
Mr. Chairman, Wyoming's vote will make the majority of Senator Kennedy.
In many ways, the most important election in the history of this country. All of us in this room and across the country are united together in our devotion to this country. We wish to keep it strong and we wish to keep it free. It requires, at this critical time, the best of all of us. And I can assure all of you here who have reposed this confidence in me that I will be worthy of your trust. We will carry the fight to the people in the fall, and we shall win.
Here is here, whether we seek it or not. But I believe that the times require imagination and courage and perseverance. I'm asking each of you to be pioneers towards that new frontier. My call is to the young in heart, regardless of age, to the stout in spirit, regardless of party, to all who respond to the scriptural call, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be dismayed. For the harsh facts of the matter are that we stand at this frontier at a turning point of history. We must prove all over again to a watching world, as we stand on a most conspicuous stage, whether this nation, conceived as it is, with its freedom of choice, its breadth of opportunity, its range of alternatives, can compete with the single-minded advance of the communist system. A whole world looks to see what we shall do, and we cannot fail that trust, and we cannot fail to try. Give me your help, and your hand, and your voice.
Ended up his cards. Those people in the huts and villages across the globe, struggling to break the bonds of mass misery, we pledge our best efforts to help them help themselves. For whatever period is required, not because the continent takes doing it, not because we keep their hopes, but because it is right. If a free society cannot have the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. Past historic efforts. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will guide our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This afternoon, following a series of threats and defiant statements, the Presidents of Alabama National Guardsmen was required by the University of Alabama to carry out the final and unequivocal order of the United States District Court of the Northern District of Alabama. That order called for the admission of two clearly qualified young Alabama residents who happen to have been born Negro. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if in short he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet free from social and economic oppression. We face, therefore, a moral crisis as a country and people. It cannot be met by repressive police action. It cannot be left to increase demonstrations in the streets. It cannot be quieted by token moves or talk. It is a time to act in the Congress, in your state and local legislative body, and above all, in all of our daily lives.
I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Muslims and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty.
Productively involved in advanced planning. Mrs. Kennedy has what to show and what to discuss. This program was created and produced by CBS News. A tour of the White House with Mrs. John F. Kennedy, created and produced by CBS News for the CBS Television Network.
From its south lawn. For the next hour, Mrs. John F. Kennedy invites you to visit the President's house and see some of the restorations she's made in its interior. Mrs. John F. Kennedy, third youngest of the 29 wives to live in the White House. Mrs. Kennedy, I want to thank you for letting us visit your mission. This is obviously the room where much of your work on it is directed.
Yes, it's attic and cellar all in one. Since our work started, we receive hundreds of letters every day. This is where we evaluate all the fines, see if we want to keep them to fit into our budget.
Mrs. Kennedy, every First Lady and every administration since President Madison's time has made changes, greater or smaller, in the White House. Before we look at any of the changes you've made, what's your basic plan?
I really don't have one, because I think this house will always grow and should. It just seemed to me such a shame when we came here to find hardly anything of the past in the house.
Now, can you make these changes according to your own personal tastes and desires?
No, I have a committee which has museum experts and government people and private citizens on it, and everything we do is subject to approval by the Fine Arts Committee.
What's your budget? Where's it come from?
Well, it's small, because everything we do is by private donation. And every time we find an object we want, then we have to go and search for a donor. It's very slow, and that way a lot of things that we would like to get slip away from us.
Now, suppose that you and your committee were to acquire some of the things that are in this room. What happens when the next president's wife comes into the White House?
Well, if they don't want it, in the past, you see, they could sell it, throw it out, do anything with it they wanted. Then a law was passed last spring, which we asked to have passed, whereby everything that's given to or bought by the White House becomes part of its permanent collection. If the future First Family doesn't want it, it goes to the Smithsonian, where it will be taken care of and displayed.
Now, if you'll forgive me, this room looks a little bit like an antique dealer's dream. Have you made any good finds lately?
We have. This chest is rather interesting. As you know, the thing we care about most is something that belonged to a past president. This little chest was left by President Van Buren to his grandson. It has writing inside it. It shows all that. And this, as we like to have mainly American furniture and things, is rather like Staffordshire, but it's American pottery, which is very rare, of the early 19th century, with an eagle and the shield on it. So, those are two rather nice finds.
They are indeed. Well, now we've seen some of the ingredients for some of the new furnishings in the White House. Could we see a completed room?
Yes, the diplomatic reception room is right here.
What is the diplomatic reception room used for besides
Well, it's the room that people see first when they come to the White House. Everyone who comes to it, state dinner here, comes through it and leaves by it. So I think it should be a pretty room.
It's the way I came to it. It's a beautiful room. The wallpaper, magnificent.
Yes, this is wallpaper that was printed in France about 1834. It's all scenes of America. Niagara Falls, New York Harbor, West Point. I think the colors are marvelous.
They are. When was it printed?
In the beginning of the 19th century.
I understand that you turned one part of this floor into a furniture shop. Is that right?
That's true. It used to be the kitchen years and years ago. Then it was the broadcast room under Franklin Roosevelt. President Truman used it to show movies. Now we have an upholstery shop here where we do all our furniture restoring and upholstery.
You do all of the reupholstering of these old pieces in here?
We do mostly. It's much quicker and more practical. So exciting to see things grow every day.
Other rooms in this particular part of the White House, are there any that we really need to see?
The China room, the gold room, and the library, which isn't finished yet. I think the first two are so well known that it would be better to go upstairs where the rooms there are so much greater interest.
Kennedy, this is the East Room pretty much. Americans have known it now for 60 years. Obviously, you haven't felt that you've had to make any great changes in it.
No, I think it's lovely. I hate to make changes, really. So when you find a room like this, it's wonderful.
This piano brings to mind that this is the part of the White House where you have the musical stairs.
That's right. This piano was designed by Franklin Roosevelt with the eagle support. And this is the end of the room that Pablo Casals played for us, where we have stage built. We had the Shakespeare players.
Isn't that the famous Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington?
That's right. That's the oldest thing in the White House. The only thing that was here since the very beginning. The government set a rather interesting precedent when that picture was painted. They commissioned the finest living artist of the day to paint the president, and they gave it as a gift to the White House. And then Dolly Madison, in the White House, was burned by the British in 1814. Managed to save it, along with a cartload of furniture and documents which have been invaluable to us in our research.
I think that is a historical entry.
Yes, and so were these Monroe candelabras. They were down in the gold room, but we put them up here so that now almost every room in this room is a Monroe candelabra on the mantelpiece. You see, after the White House was burned, Monroe came back in 1817, had to refurnish it. So he bought all these superb bronzes in France. They're on the mantle now in the green room, the blue room, and in the state dining room is perhaps the most famous of all, the Monroe centerpiece. Masses and masses of gold and glass which he bought in France.
This is the corridor that leads across the White House to the State Dining Room.
That's right. I rather love this hall. It has all the colors one thinks of when one thinks of the White House. Red and white and blue and gold. It also has 4 of the best American pictures which have been loaned to us for the White House, including the only of the Gilbert Stuart, of John Barry, who founded the Navy.
This is the part of the White House that most people think of as the main entrance, the one on Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's right. It's through this door that all the heads of state come. And this is where the president meets them. And here's where the Marine Band plays. They have ruffles and flourishes. And hail to the chief. And then there's a receiving line. And then everyone goes into dinner here in the state dining room.
This state dining room symbolizes your duties as an official hostess. Do you serve many meals here?
Yes, this is where all the state dinners and lunches are given. You can seat 102 people. So the table now is not set up for that many.
Are there many state dinners?
Yes, there are. There were almost 2 a month last year.
Tell me about the silverware and the china, Mrs. Kennedy.
It's not silver, it's all gold or vermeil. They used to use Monroe's knives before. So many of them have been lost, so they've been copied. And the china is the Eisenhower gold china. You see, so many of the beautiful old services the presidents had were destroyed and broken. And now the Truman and the Eisenhower china is all that there's enough left of to use. And there is the beautiful Monroe centerpiece, and his flower and fruit baskets and candelabra. And then this tablecloth is new. It's a gift to the White House from the firm of Porto, and it's all embroidered in gold to match the centerpiece.
And these pictures, there are 3 of them in this room. Behind us here.
Yes, these 2 run loan from the Boston Museum of Fine Art. All 3 pictures in this room are by Healy. There's Thomas Jefferson, a copy after Stuart. And then there's Daniel Webster, who didn't live here, but he visited the White House for 40 years. And then the most famous one of all is this one of Abraham Lincoln, which traditionally always hung in the state dining room.
It's a perfectly beautiful room. Have you changed it a great deal?
No, we painted it white. This room is interesting because it has the most architectural unity of any room in the White House. It's really all 1902. Theodore Roosevelt did the great restoration with Stanford White and his firm, McKinney & White. The architecture, the consoles with the eagles, the furniture, the chandelier and the appliques. And it's interesting. People always think of Theodore Roosevelt with his stuffed animals and things. Few people realize that he was second only to Thomas Jefferson in his care and knowledge about the White House. In fact, he designed the one thing which is missing here, which will soon be given to us, the superb mantle. McKinley and White had designed one with lion's heads. Theodore Roosevelt said, no, the lion's not an American animal. So he designed it with buffalo head, white marble. And McKinley and White now is copying that for us. So you'll soon see it here to replace this just simple molding that was put in 1948.
And Mrs. Kennedy, on that fireplace, just under the mantel, there's an inscription which I found one of the most moving things in the White House.
Yes, that's the very first letter that was ever written to the White House. It was written by John Adams, the first president to live here, to his wife Abigail, who had only been here 2 days, in November 2nd, 1800. And in it he said, I pray heaven to bestow the best of blessings on this house, and on all that shall hereafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men ever rule in this room. It was Franklin Roosevelt who loved that prayer and had it put on the mantelpiece.
Mrs. Kennedy, I know that after a dinner in the state dining room, it's customary to withdraw to the Red Room. May we?
Yes, it's right here. It's one of the rooms that's used the most. So I'd like to show you what we've done to it.
Oh, this is the most brilliant of the rooms that we've seen. I can see why they call it the Red Room. What is the fabric?
It's silk with a scroll border of gold. It's copied from an American Empire document. Everything in this room is Empire because the style of the room is dictated by the mantelpiece, which is Empire. This is one of the only 2 remaining mantels in the White House, 1817, after the fire. And all the others in the house are either 1902 or 48.
Which of these pieces have historical associations?
There are quite a few. This is Dolly Madison's sofa. That's Nellie Custis' sofa, George Washington's granddaughter. The most interesting are the pair of chairs by the desk. Not many people know that Mrs. Lincoln sold a lot of furniture after her husband's death because she was destitute. A lot that she'd bought and a lot of earlier furniture. Those chairs are way before Lincoln, either Van Buren or Tyler. And one of the ways that we get most of our furniture back is the people who got things at that sale. Those were a gift to Mrs. Edith McGinnis of Falls Church. I must say the generosity of those people is what makes us still have things that come